1980s is that it follows it followed an orchestrated coup by American CIA, just because the president who was actually there during that time engaged that the president who was there at that time engaged in nationalization of oil for that country. So these are the kinds of things that you need to look forward out to, not just to the ideas of what economic situations or economically beneficial ideas are, but also to the extent of what the other consequences of nationalization of it is going to be. Thirdly, one of the common fronts wherein we talk about nationalization is regarding data, or data as you pronounce it. So a lot of debates usually happen. Is it good to nationalize data, that a government should have a reserve bank of what every individual does or does not do? On the same idea, what you also need to understand is where does the notion of metadata and simple data accrue? What's the differentiation? What do companies such as Facebook, companies such as Instagram collect from you? Is it metadata? Is it data? What is the differentiation that lies between two, and what is the different uses that there exist? Like data is directly used to have personalized targeted advertisement. However, metadata is basically used to create certain amount of political influences. So it depends on how you look and how you understand data works. So I'd suggest outside economics, when you think about tech sector, like tech debates, knowing how data works, what are the implications of storing data, what amount of power does it ensue in the hands of individuals who have those data, is something that you can read about. Fourthly,
Tejas,
I think, yeah,
oh, sorry, I didn't know you were continuing. Can I ask you something?
yeah, please, please.
Yeah, so very small question. I don't understand what the nationalization of oil and space would look like. So, like,
Okay,
yeah, can you tell me that?
right. So majorly nationalization runs on the idea that there would be no private players within those sectors. As you see right now, there is an existence of SpaceX. There is an existence of, I think, what is this, Blue Origin. I think this is what Jeff Bezos space exploration is. So do you prefer a world wherein there would be only NASA operating out of America, or do you prefer a world wherein SpaceX and NASA would be coexisting when understanding what exploration space exploration looks like? So what is the need that we have to follow, or what is the need that there is certain amount of nationalization that follows within that own sector? Because things such as militarization are becoming an increasing threat to a lot of nationalities. Few ideas that I could give you upon the same idea is that a lot of companies that are sending private satellites within space can basically engage in surveillance activities without government information. So do you think that these are principally the right amount of activities that should exist without government's knowledge? Do you think that there exists certain amount of privacy invasion that should be prevented, because that should be prevented, and the only way and the most efficient way of privatizing of like preventing it is nationalization, that now NASA controls everything, that government knows whatever's like whoever is being spied upon. The trade-off within these debates usually happens that companies such as SpaceX usually invest extensively a lot and are ready to take risks when it comes to space exploration, and are usually engaged in extensive technological advancements. It's not always necessary that companies such as NASA or like governmental organizations such as ISRO always have the best possible technology. More variety of fronts of people operating into space tech usually ends up in generating more nuanced and more varied space tech. So this is what it looks like. Nationalization on the same part looks similarly. There is a lot of companies such as Saudi Aramco, as you might know. These are companies who are nationalized. Like these companies are basically owned by individuals who live within Saudi. So these like what's good. So when you talk about nationalization of oil, whenever there is certain deposits of oil on your own land, do you want only private companies to extract and sell that oil, or do you want private and government within those areas, or do you only want government extracting and selling that oil? Only government extracting and selling that oil could be basically correlated to the idea of how a lot of Middle Eastern countries are actually able to flourish, because oil is one of the like most valuable commodities, and since there is never a lack of demand of oil, so it allows a lot of geopolitical leverage as well for these countries to engage in a lot of like international treaties in the first place. Do you think that when this leverage is traded off when including private partnership within the zone sectors, is it something that is harmful for your side, or is it something which is beneficial for your side? things along the same lines that you need to read about it. Does that answer your question?
Right, right. Yeah. Thank you.
Just a sec. So yeah. So thirdly, what I would say, like fourthly, what is the one of the most common things that you will see regarding economics and regarding, how do I say, regarding this entire idea of social justice movements, minorities, and economics, one of the most overlapping themes is how does capitalism define the idea of work to be for a certain sect of people, which means that do a lot of uh, just a sec, do a lot of companies or private corporations look, like, please, like ask out if I like become confusing towards this point. A lot of corporations have different valuation of how they understand work to be done by different genders and different races, which means that there is an implicit bias that exists that whatever work that a black individual will do is going to be necessarily inferior by what a work of white individual is going to do. This bias could be unfounded. This bias could be well grounded in some reasoning or in some research. But the problem here becomes is that the entire capitalistic structure that exists within corporation views two individuals doing the same work for the same amount of time different, like have different values to them. This is the reason why there is a different valuation of work that exists regarding men and women as well. A lot of companies, a lot of individuals think that women are necessarily inferior when producing an efficient result regarding something. So they offer them technically a lesser salary or offer them lesser positions within their own company or within their own team. These how do I say, these discriminations that arise out of the idea of having different values of work is something that you should read upon. Look how companies value work differently and look how it becomes problematic. One of the few ideas that I could lead you guys upon is, by default, a lot of individuals who work hard within corporate structures, like one of the good arguments that you could run for, how do I say, okay, this becomes a bit complicated. Equal pay and equal net worth of two genders are two different things, which means that if you are being paid equally is something that feminist movement wants, that every man and women should get, like men, women, and other genders should get paid an equal amount of salary, irrespective of what bias you have against them. Correct. But the problem that becomes in the dominant narrative is a lot of people say that, look, the net worth of an average man is something which is more than net worth of average woman. So therefore, you should ask for equal gender pay. The problem within these narratives is that people undermine what capitalistic value of labor is for a woman and what capitalistic value labor is for a man. A lot of women who work in corporate sectors usually have duties in their own homes. A lot of men that work in corporate sectors don't really have that much of duty at home. Looking after kids, caring for your grandparents, caring for your parents, making food at home. These are the ideas that patriarchy by default pushes upon women. So this is the reason why a lot of women don't really take up jobs which are hectic in nature, like which take up 18 to 20 hours of your day. Women don't take up jobs late at night because working over hours and getting more money is not possible or not feasible for them, because the ideas of safety and taking care of your kid back at home is something that women prioritize more and men prioritize less, because they have wives looking for them or mothers looking for their things when they go back home. So these kinds of structural problems that patriarchy has put up for women technically pushes them backward in the average median worth of every woman in the world. So these kinds of ideas of where does this capitalistic notion of a woman perpetrates within society and how it creates an unjust society in itself, irrespective of what people say, is something that you should read more upon. Read how Marxist value of labor arises for women. Read how during industrialization there was a different levels of what men and women should be, and things along the similar lines. Right. Any questions so far? Oh, okay. Cool. So
Hello.
next is, yes.
Sir, I didn't get the last idea what the debate is around, like capitalism and the gender equality, or is it capitalism and social equality?
I couldn't get your question clearly. I think like it's maybe because of my internet or like your internet is bad. Could you just type out the question on the chat? I'll answer it that way. Cool. Yeah. So the next thing that we're going to basically look about is what is labor union. Labor union is one of the common areas of debate. Read whether labor union is something which is technically relevant during contemporary times, or is it labor union that was necessary during times of mass enslavement, mass gender discrimination. Does it really stand the test of time? What is the economics that is involved? Do companies or competition benefit negatively from existence of labor unions? There's a lot of like conflicting views when it comes to labor union. And remember, within debates, there is no absolution of truth. Like there is no objective truth that look, labor unions is right, labor unions is bad, and therefore you should adhere to it. Okay, so it's, I think the themes are overlapping. When you understand new ideas, you'll be able to differentiate what the debate needs at what moment. It's I'm just feeding you knowledge, or like how do I say? I'm just feeding you starting points of where you could start thinking about a specific idea. I'm not saying like it definitely has to like be categorized into gender equality or social equality. It can vary in whatever debate you go to, in whatever forms you face certain questions in a debate too. Does that answer the question? Am I audible? I'm just checking.
Yes, sir, you're audible.
मेंटर बन रहे हैं तो थोड़ा वाईफाई सही करवा लो अपना.
हाँ यार वाईफाई सही कराना.
नहीं बीच में अटक गए थे आप.
Like did I miss, like what did you guys like not understand, what did you guys like miss out?
नहीं, it was just a frozen movement. I don't think you were saying anything.
Okay. Right. So next what we need to think about is how foreign political aid works. Like China lending money to Africa, is it something which is in interest of Africa, or is it something which is deteriorating Africa? One of the common questions that regard on the similar lines comes out of the idea of the Belt and Road Initiative that China is putting up. Is it something which is creating a debt trap, which is all okay? So debt trap is basically China giving a lot of money to African nations without conditionality of return, which means the conditions of a loan are usually strict when like giving them out internationally, and specifically to countries which are have bad economic development rate, because it's obvious like no country will want to give out 20 to 30 billions without expecting any returns. So the point here is that China is giving out extensive amount of money to these countries, developing infrastructure on low conditionality. What eventually does is that it puts them into debt crisis, which means that these countries cannot end up giving money back to China, and therefore they end up handing over a lot of other external infrastructures, things such as Djibouti port in Africa and Hambantota port in Sri Lanka. This is one of the common arguments that's come around the same idea of debt trap. So you need to learn what are the economic implications of Belt and Road Initiative of China, and more generally on how foreign political aid helps or does not help in fostering economic growth within a certain sector or certain country. Right. Next, we read how there is a role of EU and US in fostering economic and sustainable approaches within countries. Okay, so this might get a bit like out of this question of this debate, out of the question of this session, but a lot of countries that so there are economical alliances and there are political alliances within geographically divided countries. EU is also a geographical alliance, is also an economic alliance. NATO is more of a military alliance, less of an economic alliance. So what are the kinds of alliances that you see are economically viable for a lot of countries to enter in? If you have heard about ASEAN countries within Southeast Asia, one of the common debatable topics that exist within these countries is that should there be an economic integration of these 5 or 6 whatever countries that there are. Is it something which is in interest of individual countries? Is it not in interest of these individual countries? Is something that you should read upon, is something that you should learn. Next, we think that taxation is one of the common things that we are going to address within a lot of debates. Taxation in general sense talks about, like, read on what the moral principle is when we talk about taxation. So one of the debates that I did was on the idea of how exit tax works. Exit tax in the sense that if you are an individual who's like taking up a long-term job in a foreign land, so you have to pay a tax to your domestic country over a certain period of time, because this is what we understand by exit tax. Is it something which is beneficial? Is it something not beneficial? Is something as an economic principle? So one of the ideas or one of the underlying principles in this debate is that these individuals who are basically leaving these countries are individuals who really owe something back to those countries to pay them tax, or are they really using something from that country, or like you engaging in resources from those countries, that paying them tax even when not being in that country is something which is a necessary thing to happen. Similarly, on this idea that when we think of why taxation should be employed on certain things, or why there is an introduction of new kind of tax, do you think that this is something which is principally justified? Is it something that I am supposed to, as a normal individual, pay or engage in? Is something that you should read upon. Common ideas is how sugar tax work. Does it make products cheaper, or does it make products costlier? There is certain amount of things known as pink tax that is paid by women disproportionately. That things such as a normal razor that a man uses is costs way less than what a normal female razor looks like, because just because they have created a, like, corporations have created a distinction between corporates have created a distinction between female razor and a male razor, and they have made a female razor pink in color. Does that justify the idea that does this kind of justification, this kind of gender discrimination, does it justify the kind of corporate structure that it ensues? So is it something good? Is it something bad? Should you be buying into it? Should you not be buying into it? Arguments on the same line. Common taxation is on the idea that should you increase taxation on alcohol and drugs? Should there be more tax on guns? Should there be less tax on guns? Is guns a necessity for minority communities which are already economically worse off? Should you increase taxation on guns? Should you increase the cost of guns? Is it going to discourage them from engaging in self-defense mechanisms? And is it going to disproportionately affect them? Are the same ideas that you run around on the same thoughts. So regarding these ideas, learn what taxation looks like, what kind of radical taxation is. So one of the very bizarre debates that I've ever come across was on the idea that to ensure gender pay equality, we'll introduce 33% tax on whatever men get paid. So don't just think that there is a implication of tax that exists. You also need to think that what is the outcome of those tax. Is that tax something which is directly linked to the cause that you're thinking about? Is it really going to create gender equality, or is it just ripping off of certain individuals in the name of social justice? So things along the same lines, your choice how you want to read it. Something which is pretty controversial of how buying local or engaging in local of domestic goods is something which is profitable for a country. Is it or is it not? Look, I'm not sure how trashy a lot of it, like domestic adjudicators can be, like core adjudicators can be. I'm very sure somebody will come up and say ki is Atmanirbhar Bharat is a good scheme or not scheme, like is it a good policy or not, like it's not a good enough policies. So just saying, as a matter of precaution, read how it works. One of the common examples that I could give you about is how in Japanese industries there was an extensive boycott, like within China, that there was a boycott of Japanese made automobiles. So it technically actually led to those Japanese automobile country, like companies, actually leaving China and probably going bankrupt in near future. So these are the kinds of implications that you need to read upon. Don't just stay constrained to what is, like, is Atmanirbhar Bharat a good scheme or not? Read how international, like, boycott, like economic boycotts have worked out. Has it worked out in favor of these countries or not? Next, we think of economics of sales. Economics of sales is regarding the idea that we talked about taxation, gun sales, alcohol, prostitution, gambling, maybe surrogacy to a certain extent. Like, there is a very fine line of what economics and surrogacy or like economic incentive looks like. don't really have to always engage in it. Just a second. Up. Uh, so these are the kinds of ideas that you should like definitely engage upon. Know that how sales get affected. This ensures basic principles of demand and supply. So not a lot that you really need to think about, but definitely something that you should read upon it. Next is government incentivization and the idea of gentrification. Government incentivization, okay, vast amount of debates that you will see regarding economics is that should the government incentivize artists who are belonging to minority communities compared to artists who are belonging to majority communities. This looks like in India, you basically Indian government funding tribal art and obscure art that exists in a lot of local communities in a lot of places over government funding all of them, which means that there will be an equal funding to mainstream art as well and those obscure art as well. What is the economic trade-off? You need to understand the economic situation of how art is sold. What is the value of the goods which are made by these local handloom spinners in Varanasi? Is it something which is explicitly valuable, or is it something which is in market considered to be highly valuable, which has led to government believing that funding these things are actually going to help them grow, or there is certain amount of market dissatisfaction or market how do I say a lack of confidence within market. They think that maybe these handloom like local handlooms cannot supply and cannot consistently supply the equal amount of output regarding certain how do I say certain products such as saris as what a normal good factory would. So this leads to certain amount of deprioritization of these handloom weavers compared to what corporations do. Is it helping them? Is it not helping them? Things along the same lines that you need to learn, like you need to do about. Then we come to banking. Banking is something that is a common idea within debating. Like you need to look what government spending is, why government should prioritize spending in certain areas, why it should not prioritize spending in certain areas. This looks like something along the same lines of should fiscal policy be maintained by government or should fiscal policy be maintained by the central bank. One of the common debates where it happens is on the idea of microfinance. Looks what microfinance debates are. There are microfinance banks such as I'm not really able to remember the names along in smaller local areas which fund local businesses. Is it good for international banks such as JP Morgan to enter those markets? Is it really going to help them? Is it not going to help them? What is the structural disadvantagements that these individuals who are borrowing from these areas look like? What are the loan conditions that are uniquely empowering to these local businesses? Is the reason that they're actually able to benefit from these microfinance banks is the reason that they're actually thriving. Things along the same lines. Then we talk about special economic zones and how do they work out. This is not something which is uniquely helpful, but this will come into use when you like learn a lot of debating. Like when you're like way too much into debating, and you'll understand that the creation of special economic zones is something which is going to help you create certain unique models in terms of your first speech. Then corporations engaging in layoffs and structural unemployment, like this is something that you can read about. Behavioral economics, things such as nudge theory and psychological intervention through governmental policies. A lot of nudging that happens in a lot of countries is regarding this idea that on on bus stand, I will like I will put how do I say the cigarette trash box or any trash box far away from the bus stand so that individuals who actually want to smoke will now walk up to those trash can to smoke there and not smoke in public. When I put up light blue street lights in Japan, so that it creates certain amount of visibility for police officers to even look into obscure areas. Is these kinds of psychological intervention through government policies a valid activity or valid engagement on their part? is psychological intervention or psychological deterrence created by government through their policy a morally justifiable act? Should they do? Should they not do? If they do, what are the like possible exploitations that could happen and trade-off between the same? Remember to like characterize what these countries look like. This is something that we covered in the last session, but yeah, I'll go to questions later on. Then one of the common things are that we will face is economic outcomes of immigration. Abhyuday, should we join the same link once again, or should we do it a bit later?
Yeah, so there's 6 minutes left. So if you're like if you're finishing in 5, then it's okay. But I don't think you are.
I'm not like entirely finishing. I mean, like this is we're like
So
done, but
so it's that far from done. So I'll just revive it.
no, not done. Okay. Wait. I'll just explain how immigration and economics are deeply related. So a lot of reasons that there is certain amount of political dissatisfaction within West and within India is around the idea that which is true. A lot of immigration problems that happen is that people think that if immigration occurs, there is a lot of like people will just barge into and will disrupt your economy, will disrupt your political standoff, will now vote for roof parties and things along the same lines. Read, does it really happen? Does immigration really affect them? Does it really affect them and things along the same line? Read how asylum grants work. Read how economic status of these immigrant countries also affect in how immigration officers treat them. Immigrants coming from Qatar and immigrants coming from Southeast, like Middle East, are treated worse off than immigrants coming from India. What is the distinction between them? And when I say immigrants, I'm not saying immigrants which are all laborers. Immigrants have different categories of high skilled immigrants, such as in like employee level immigrants, such as people working from top tier 1 firms going in America to work. What is their economic contribution to their own country? Is it something which is good? Is it something which is bad? And should these countries stop this immigration? Should it not do these immigration? Are the same question that you will be addressing in your debates. On this idea, just a small thing that I will be doing before we conclude this session. I think like this is far more enough for you all to like just start off reading into it. Okay, so now what I've thought of doing right now is that we'll end this session. We'll enter into another session. I'll give you very brief pointers, one-liners of what you can read upon. Write those liners down, read about them in economic terms, and I'll show you what matter file looks like, how to do matter prep, and then we'll conclude the session. This is at best 15 minutes, so join this link once again. Thank you.